Okay. Could I just get a thumbs up or a message if somebody from one of the universities could just give me a yes, it's working. I can see your slides in the chat. That would be great. I can't see anyone, so I can't see any thumbs.
It's all good, Helen. We can see it.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. So good afternoon, everybody, firstly, and thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. So this is our webinar on unlocking the potential of global talent and recruiting international students and graduates from universities in North East England. So my name's Helen Atkinson. I'm Career Development and Academic Support Team Manager at the University of Sunderland, but this is very much a collaborative effort between our 5 regional universities in the North East. So Durham, Newcastle, Northumbria, Sunderland and Teesside universities. So as part of a team of colleagues from those universities, we've been developing this webinar for a number of months now to help our employer contacts based regionally to understand more about the benefits of recruiting international students and graduates from our universities, and really to help you understand more about the different routes that you can take if you're interested in recruiting international students and graduates from the region. So hopefully you're an employer who is joining us this afternoon and you're interested in finding out more about these routes and more about the experiences of employers and colleagues who have gone through that process previously. You might be completely new to this. You might be just curious about how to go about recruiting international students and graduates. You might have a little bit more experience. So hopefully there is something for you this afternoon. So before we get started properly, I just wanted to talk to you a little bit this afternoon about how the session is going to work. What we'll do firstly is I'll kick off and I'll explain a little bit about our international student population in the North East. So how many international students and graduates do we have? What countries do we come from? Just to provide the context and set the scene a little bit and really introduce you to the scale and the huge numbers of international students that we have studying right here in our region. Then I will pass over to colleagues Tal and Kieran from an organisation called Paragon Law. So they are going to provide the immigration perspective. So they'll provide an overview of the main immigration routes to recruiting international students. One of those routes is called the graduate route visa. That's an unsponsored route. The other route is called the skilled worker visa. So that is a sponsored route. So Paragon will talk through what you need to know about the graduate and the skilled worker routes and provide some useful links and advice about where you can go next if you want to find out a little bit more about that. Then the next part of the session really is the chance to hear from a number of employers who are based in the North East who have recently recruited international graduates into their organisation. So that really is going to be a chance to hear more about their experiences, the benefits that they found recruiting international talent. And we'll end with some top tips and further support. So there are lots of different ways as an employer that you can collaborate with our regional universities. It isn't just about graduate jobs. There's lots of other ways that you can work with our amazing teams. So we'll let you know a little bit more about that at the end of the session. Before we start properly, a little bit of housekeeping. So the session is being recorded today. So if you've signed up to the session, we'll send through the recording as well as the session slides later this week. So you'll have all of those available to you after the session. If we can ask everybody to keep themselves on mute, unless you are presenting, that just means that we can run through today a little bit more smoothly. We've got colleagues who are monitoring the chat, so if you've got questions during the course of the presentation that you'd like to ask, feel free to put those in the chat and we'll do our best to respond to them. We do ask that if you're an employer that you don't ask us very, very specific questions about a particular immigration situation that you have within your own organisation, just because we're probably not going to have time to run through that during today's session. Finally, it's likely that we've also got some international students and graduates who have joined today's session as well. So welcome and hello. You're really welcome at today's session. The one thing that I would say is for any international students and graduates that have joined us, this session is primarily aimed at employers that are based in the North East to help them understand more about hiring you and recruiting you. So again, if you're looking for some support, if you're seeking employment, thinking about what to do next,
quite a bit of difference as to like.
do make use of the support that's available from your university, but you're very welcome here this afternoon too. So that was the housekeeping. So now on to the main part of the session. So before I hand over to Paragon Law, I just wanted to set the scene a little bit and provide a bit of an introduction to our international student population in the Northeast. So numbers-wise, we have a lot of international students that come to the UK to study, and a lot that are studying within our region itself. So the numbers are perhaps a couple of years old now because there is a bit of a sort of a time delay. So we don't receive our sort of most up-to-date numbers. We don't have them for the start of this academic year, for example. Back in 2019, the UK government launched an international education strategy, and in that strategy, they set a target for the UK to recruit 600,000 international students into universities in the UK by 2030. Now that target was smashed in 2001, 2021, 2022. So we had 679,000 international students that were studying in the UK in 2022. Thinking about our Northeast population in particular, 32,000 of those international students were studying at the 5 universities that we have represented here today. Obviously, our international students are very diverse. They come from lots of different backgrounds. They study all kinds of different programs. You do find that the majority are studying on one-year postgraduate taught programs. So not always, but a lot of those students are perhaps studying in our region for 1 year. They might start their course in September and then their course the following September, but equally there are courses that will start in January in the summer. So you'll often find with our international taught postgraduate students that they might be starting and finishing their courses at different points in the academic year. Now, in terms of what those international students study, like I mentioned, they are studying a really wide range of degree disciplines, from healthcare, medicine, right through to business, IT, computing, etc. I'd say nationally and within our region as well, the main subjects that those international students study relate to business and finance, IT, engineering, and within healthcare related disciplines. Thinking about the regional split though, where do those 32,000 international students actually come from? And as you'll see on this particular slide, it really is a mixed bag. So we have very high numbers of international students that are from Asia, particularly I would say China and India. Very high numbers of students from India, for example, who are studying at Northumbria, Teesside universities, but equally large numbers of Indian students studying across our region's universities. Africa slightly lower, so around 6,000, with higher numbers, particularly at Sunderland and Teesside. We have quite wide representation from the EU and other European countries across all 5 institutions. The Middle East, lower numbers, but mainly students from Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE. North America, particularly Durham University, quite a high proportion of those students are from the US studying at Durham, and fewer numbers from South America and Australasia, as you might expect. But really, this is designed to just give you some insight really into the really wide variety of international students that we have and the diverse student bodies that each of our 5 organisations has. So that was a little bit of scene setting. So at this point, what I am going to do is stop sharing and I'm going to pass on to my colleagues Tal and Kirin. So Tal and Kirin are from an organisation called Paragon Law. They're not based in the Northeast, but they've worked really closely with university careers teams across the UK to run sessions like this to help employers understand more about the different immigration routes that you can take if you're interested in hiring international students. So Tal and Kirin are going to speak for around 20-25 minutes and provide you an overview of some of these routes, and then we'll start our panel session with Mark and Lee. So I'll pass over to you, Tal and Kirin.
Thank you, Alison. I will just quickly share my slides. Can you see those, Helen?
Yes, looks good. Thank you.
Fabulous, fabulous. So I've got a lot of content to go through. There's a number of slides. I'm going to spend some time I'll spend more time on certain slides and less on others. But what I really wanted was that once you get a copy of these slides, you've got a bit more content to read in your own time. The subjects that we're going to go through, as Helen stated, is going to be the graduate route and the skilled worker visa. And for the skilled worker visa, a business needs a employer sponsor license. And we're going to do that through the journey of someone who I've called Jason Lee, an international student. I've changed the name, but the facts are based on an actual case that I represented on recently. So this is the scenario, and what I want you to do is to put yourself in the shoes of the employer or the HR person who's looking to recruit international people with this example. So you are the recruitment manager at an architecture and interior design company. You receive an application from Jason Lee for the role of an architect technician. Jason is a Chinese international student. His first degree is in architecture, and he is currently completing an MSc in building science. He also volunteers as a sales assistant on Saturdays at the British Heart Foundation. The design director wants to hire Jason for this role as the business is designing a major mixed-use development in Nanjing, China, and his academic language and cultural know-how will help with working with their Chinese partners and client. Okay, so the key thing to note here is that international students are able to work 20 hours during term time, and when it's holidays or they're outside of term time, they can work full time. International students also get a period of 4 months after their course is over in order to either switch their immigration status, go to the graduation ceremony, or make arrangements to return home. And during those 4 months, an international student is able to work full time. Volunteering with a registered charity is allowed, and volunteering where an international student isn't receiving any payment or any benefits in kind does not need to be included as part of the 20 hours. However, if an international student is working at another organization, then it is important that you at least ask the question if they're working any other hours with any other employer or charity, so that you can then decide how many hours that you're going to be employing the individual. So the important point to note here is that the HR person should ensure that Jason is contracted to work no more than 20 hours per week, but these hours can be increased during vacations. Whilst someone is an international student, the employer can only offer a fixed term contract up until the date of the student visa expires. There's no minimum salary requirements except for national minimum wage, which is based on age. And it's important that as HR people or as the employer, that you obtain right to work checks as your statutory defence should you ever be audited by the UKVI. And what you need to do is obtain a letter or other document issued by the university to confirm when term time dates are, so that you can ensure that you're offering only 20 hours or more outside of term time. You will need to carry out a Home Office online right to work check, and this will be done so by obtaining the share code from the international student and their date of birth, and then going on the Home Office website to do the check. And then you'll need to print out the profile page as your evidence that that part of the right to work check's been completed. Also mark up the expiry date of when the visa is going to expire in your calendar, so that you can ensure that you're able to have early discussions with the international student as to what they're going to be doing next in terms of their visa status. Okay, so the scenario moves on. Jason has progressed well in the team, and he has now completed his MSc and is waiting for his result. He has applied for the role of a graduate trainee business information modeling coordinator. He is the best candidate for this role, which starts in October, but his visa expires in September. The business want him to continue in his current position of architect technician until October. So as Jason has completed his course, it follows that he's outside of term time, which means that his employer can increase his hours to full-time hours. He must submit an application to switch his his immigration status prior to his current visa expiring. And if he does this, then the conditions of his student's visa will automatically be extended up until the Home Office make a decision on his new application, meaning that he can continue to work with the organisation until there's a decision on his next application. In this case, what Jason did was make an application to switch status to the graduate route. And once he made this application, there was a requirement on the employer to make what's called an employer checking service application, an ECS check, to obtain what's called a positive verification notice confirming that A, he made an in-time application before his previous visa expired, and that the application is valid. And what will happen then is that the PVN, the positive verification notice, gives the employer a 6-month statutory excuse to continue to employ Jason up until a decision is made on his new visa. The decision on the graduate visa can take anything up to 8 weeks, but generally we found that the UKVI can be a lot quicker than that. That's just their standard time that they give on the website as to how long to give. So in terms of the graduate route, the key points to note about this visa is that anyone who's qualified in a UK bachelor's degree or postgraduate degree or other eligible course is able to apply for the graduate visa. They have to ensure that they've successfully completed the course, and their university needs to confirm this to the UKVI as part of the application process. They must currently be on a student visa, meaning that the application to switch has to be made in country. The student can't return home or go to a third country in order to make the application. And once the application is approved, the international student on a graduate visa will be given 2 years if they graduated in a degree level course or higher. But if they've qualified in a PhD, then they will be given 3 years leave to work in the UK or to look for work. In terms of employment, there's no minimum salary requirements on the part of the employer. So there's no minimum salary except for national minimum wage, and there's no sponsorship requirements. And generally, the Home Office and the government introduced the graduate visa to allow employers the opportunity to recruit the brightest and the best individuals, to try and test them, to train and develop them. And then once the graduate visa is about to expire, having invested that time into the international student, you'd then be in a more of a position, an inclination to go through the sponsorship requirements and switch the visa to a skilled worker visa. As far as the individual's concerned, there's no minimum hours or the number of jobs that they're able to take, and they can carry out any type of job except for that as a professional sports person, i.e. as a professional player or coach. The application fee is this, and the immigration health surcharge is £1,035 per each year that the individual will be given their status in the UK. The application and the fee is the responsibility of the student, so that's an application that they need to make. And once they're granted their status, they will be granted digital status, meaning that you as the employer will need to obtain a share code and carry out the same online right to work check, and then mark up the expiry date of the visa. At this stage, you can offer a permanent contract to the individual once they're on a graduate route. Okay, so the scenario moved on. Jason is now 29. He completed his training in 12 months, and during the last 6 months, he has been working in the role of a BIM coordinator. He is earning a salary of £30,500 per annum. His supervisor is concerned that Jason's graduate visa is due to expire in 6 months and wants to ensure that the business can retain him. The business does not have a sponsor license. Jason has also indicated that he would like to complete a PhD whilst working. Okay, so the key considerations for HR at this stage is that the graduate route is non-extendable, meaning that if Jason wants to remain in the UK, he's going to have to make an application to switch to the skilled worker visa. In order to do this, the business requires a sponsor license to issue Jason with what's called a certificate of sponsorship, with which Jason can then apply for a skilled worker visa. It should also be noted that study that requires student visa sponsorship is not permitted. Therefore, if Jason wanted to do his PhD, he would have to switch back to the student visa because that a PhD requires sponsorship by the education institution. Though professional development courses are allowed if someone's on the skilled worker route. In our particular case, Jason decided that he wanted to continue continue working, and therefore the business proceeded with the skilled worker visa and a sponsor license. So the key point here is that firstly, the business needs to apply for a sponsor license. And in order to do this, you really need to give yourselves generally what we find anything up to 6 to 8 weeks to be in a position to be able to make the application. And what's required is an online application that's made on the UKVI portal. You will then need to provide documentary evidence in support of the application, and this will include documents confirming your trading presence. So documents such as corporate bank statements, evidence of your business premises, confirmation that you're registered for PAYE with HMRC, if you're VAT registered, evidence of that. If you're working in a particular sector that requires accreditation from another governing organisation, then the UKVI will require evidence of that as well. So, for example, if you're a nursing home, then you'll need to provide evidence of your CQE registration and audits. You will also need to provide details of why the business wants to join the sponsor management system, and generally where an employer states that they want to recruit an international student or they have someone that requires sponsorship, then that information will be accepted by the UKVI as a valid reason. You also need to ensure that you're prepared for what's called a pre-registration audit. So generally, anything up to about 20% of businesses that apply for a sponsor license will be selected for such an audit. And what the UKVI do as part of the audit is visit your business premises to ensure that you've got HR systems and processes in place in order to recruit migrant workers. So that's why really you need anywhere in the region of up to 8 weeks to ensure that that your house is in order before you make the online application. You also need to be aware of what the costs are for a sponsor license application. So if you're a medium or large business, the sponsor license application fee will be £1,476. If you're a small organisation or charity, the fee will be £536. You will also need to then pay for the certificate of sponsorship, which is £239. And then the immigration skills charge, which is £1,000 for each year of sponsorship of the individual if a large business, or £364 if you're a small organisation. Now, one thing to note, which is quite important, is that if you're going to be sponsoring someone who's on a student visa, so you're going to be switching them from a student visa to the skilled worker visa, then the immigration skills charge is not payable to such a switch. But if someone goes onto the graduate route and then they're going to switch to the skilled worker route, then this immigration skills charge will need to be paid. As for the person that you're sponsoring, they need to be responsible for the immigration health surcharge, which is £1,035 for each year of sponsorship, and the IHS gives the individual access to free NHS treatment. And then the visa application fee, depending on how many years you're going to sponsor the individual, will be either £827 or £1,636. Now, in our experience working particularly with larger organisations, we find that they will also meet the individual's fees as well as part of the application process, but there's no requirement on an employer to do this. And certainly when we're doing similar presentations to international students, we do ensure that they have this money ready and available and budgeted for should they be sponsored. What we do advise sponsors is our corporate business clients is that if they are going to meet the cost of sponsorship fees that the individual needs to pay, that in the employment contract you have some form of a clawback clause which allows you to claw back any portion of the money that you've paid if there's a premature end of employment before the individual's sponsorship comes to an end. Okay, so the sponsor license decision, as I say, can take 8 to 10 weeks, longer if you're chosen for a compliance visit. So the key there is to, if you're going to proceed with a sponsor license application, to sponsor a student or someone who's working for you, to do this as soon as possible. You can pay an additional fee of £500 to fast track the decision so that the decision is given in 10 working days. However, if the UKVI decide to select you for a pre-registration audit, then this fee will be refunded back to you and you'll go to the normal decision-making process. The license is then granted. It's a one-off fee and your license is there for life effectively. And you're given access to what's called the sponsor management system, which is a web-based portal through which you will make applications for certificate of sponsorships. You will update the UKVI of any updates regarding the business. For example, if you've been involved in a merger or acquisition or something similar. And you'll also make reports on the sponsored worker if there's any changes to their employment. For example, they've changed location of where they're working, or if they've left your employment prematurely before their sponsorship comes to an end. If for any reason your application for a sponsor license is refused, you cannot make an application to apply for a new license until 6 months have passed since the date of the decision to refuse the application. And therefore, you know, the point that I'd impress upon you here is to ensure that you get adequate advice and that you're sure about what you're going to be doing throughout the application process before proceeding with that to save the cost and time of a rejection later on. So in terms of the skilled worker visa, so some terminology here. They must have a valid certificate of sponsorship, which can only be assigned by a business that is on the sponsor management system. The role that you're sponsoring must be of RQF level 3 or above. And so the UKVI have what's called standard occupation codes through which you can look to see whether the role that you want to sponsor is at RQF level 3. The individual must be paid a minimum salary of £38,700 or the going rate for the particular role that's on offer, and this will be a bit more clearer in a subsequent slide, though there are exceptions to this, of which international students and those on a graduate visa is an exception where a lower salary can be paid, and again this will be clearer on a subsequent slide. The individual must also satisfy the English language test, and all graduates of a UK university will automatically satisfy that. And they must also show that they have at least £1,270 in savings that have been in their bank account for at least 30 days before the date that they make their application to switch to a skilled worker visa. As a sponsor, you're able to certify maintenance if you choose to do so, and generally what we find is that most employers are happy to do that. A skilled worker visa can be issued for up to 5 years. And generally what we find with a number of employers that we work with, that they find this as a good recruitment strategy because they have a degree of certainty as to how long the individual will stay with the business. But the 5 years is extendable beyond that time. And after 5 years, the individual can apply for indefinite leave to remain, so long as by the 5-year mark they've been paid the going rate for the salary as per the occupation code. It's also important to note that any salary that you pay and that you state on the certificate of sponsorship has to be based on a 37.5-hour week and mustn't include any bonuses or allowances. So, and once the individual's sponsored and working for you, they can only work in the job for which they're sponsored, i.e. for yourselves, though they can take 20 hours additional employment in any other role which can be sponsored as well. So any other job that's at RQF level 3 or above. And my advice there would be that if you have certain intellectual property or confidentiality issues, that you deal with that in any employment contract with a skilled worker, preventing them from potentially working with competitors or other organisations. Once someone's on a skilled worker visa, they can bring their dependents to the UK, and dependents can work without requiring sponsorship. Okay, so in terms of sponsoring individuals, the UKVI provided this chart here in terms of when an individual can be paid a lower salary. It's a bit of an eyesore. I'm not going to go through this in too much detail, but what you'll notice here at option A is that the floor salary generally is £38,700 per year, or the going rate for the particular occupation as per the occupation code, whichever is higher. In terms of international students or those on a graduate route, they're regarded as new entrants, i.e. they're at the start of their career. And in that scenario, they can be paid a floor salary of £30,960, where you're able to discount the going rate salary as per the occupation code by 30%. So you can pay 70% of the going rate salary as per that occupation code, so long as that does not go below the floor salary of £30,960. So in terms of new entrants, as I say, that's any international student who's going to be switching from the skilled work, from the student visa, anyone who's switching from the graduate visa, anyone who's under the age of 26 at the time that they're going to switch their visa. And the other thing that you need to note is that you can only rely on the new entrant salary for a maximum of 4 years. So if someone switches from the student visa, you can rely on the new entrant salary for 4 years. If someone has already been on the graduate visa, the period that they've spent on the graduate visa will be included as part of that 4 years. So if someone's been on a graduate visa for the full 2 years, then you can only rely on the new entrant salary for a further 2 years, taking it up to 4 years. So in our case, going back to Jason's example, the occupation code that we chose was Chartered Architectural Technologists, Planning Officers and Consultants. And when you look at occupation codes, it will break out for you what the different options here are. And you'll recall that the going rate salary was option A, so whatever the salary here is. And you'll see here that sometimes it's the salary will be lower than what the floor salary has to be. So in this case, the occupation code is lower than the £38,700. Meaning that if the employer wanted to employ someone who wasn't a graduate or an international student, when they look at this occupation code, they would have to increase the salary to the individual to the floor salary of £38,700. In our case, we're relying on option D because, as I say, Jason's going to be switching from the graduate route. And so the employer had to pay him a salary of £30,960. And he was currently at that stage being paid a salary of £30,500. So they had to increase his salary by £460. And they could sponsor him on the new entrant rate for a period of 2 years because he'd already spent 2 years on the graduate route, meaning that when they get to the stage where they need to extend his visa beyond the 2-year new entrant rate, they will have to pay him a minimum salary of £38,700. The other point to note when you're looking at occupation codes is quite often you could choose between one or more of occupation codes that are very similar. So if you look at this one here, which is 2451 architects, and then the one that we relied on in Jason's case, you'll see that the going rate salaries are quite high for the architect code and a bit lower for the chartered architectural technologists code, and therefore the new entrant salaries are higher as well. And the important point to impress upon here is that you know, really review which are the relevant occupation codes, because you may find that you accidentally are relying on a higher occupation code, and therefore when you look at the new entrant salary or the going rate salary that you may have to pay an individual in 2 years or 4 years time, depending on when you switch into the new entrant rate, you may think that this is not economical because you're not paying, for example, your home workers the same amount. Whereas if you search a bit more, you may actually find that there is an occupation code that you can rely on, where the salaries are more in line with what you're willing to pay. Can someone tell me how long I've got so I know what pace I'm going at here?
Yeah, if we can maybe just wrap up in about 5 minutes, Tal, that would be great.
Thank you, Helen. Okay, so when sponsoring a skilled worker individual, what you need to make sure is that you have an annual allocation of an undefined certificate of sponsorship already on the sponsor management system. And if you don't have one, then you need to make an application ASAP. You can pay an extra £200 for priority processing to have the undefined code straight away. If you're making a sponsor license application in order to sponsor someone and you've given a reason that you're going to be using the sponsor license to switch an international student or a graduate visa holder to the skilled worker visa, what you'll find is as soon as your application is approved and you have access to the sponsor management system, that you'll have that certificate available and ready to be used. You can apply for a skilled worker visa and assign a certificate of sponsorship 3 months prior to actually employing an individual, meaning that if someone is already, is an international student, but they're going to be completing their course within a period of 3 months, then you can assign that certificate of sponsorship, so long as the start date on the certificate of sponsorship is a date after the individual's studies complete. As for the individual, they will then complete and submit the online application, upload supporting documents. They will then arrange a biometric appointment or deal with this through the UK ID app that the Home Office have available. The individual can also apply for priority processing by paying an additional, Kieran, if you can put that in the Q&A in the chat. I can't remember what the priority processing fee is, but that will give a decision within a week as opposed to 8 weeks. So in Jason's case, this is what the cost of the total project was for his particular client. The certificate of sponsorship was £239. The immigration skills charge, they were a large business and they were switching in from the graduate route, was £1,000 for each year because they could only rely on 2 years of the new entrant salary. So that was £2,000. Immigration health surcharge was two lots of £1,035, making it a total of £2,070. And then the visa fee, because it was a visa application for less than 3 years, was £827, making a total of that. Now, I'm not going to go over the last 2 slides in any detail. The information is going to be there for you, but as employers, I just want you to be aware of what you can say during job adverts in terms of rejecting those who might require sponsorship and therefore you refusing to take their application any further. The best practice is that applications for jobs must be refused on merit, i.e. there's better candidates than the people that you're refusing, and that right to work check should happen later on in the recruitment process. There are some exceptions here that I've mentioned. It's not an exhaustive list. I'm sure there's other scenarios that will come up from time to time. And then the leading case on this is Osborne Clark versus Parafit. And I've put there what I believe is the main paragraph of the judgment, which says that an employer has a duty to take a application further if someone requires sponsorship and not refuse that just based on that fact alone, because that could be seen as race discrimination. I didn't say much about myself and Kieran, who we are, but hopefully we'll get to know each other in the chat. You can certainly scan our QR codes there. Hopefully they work, and get in contact with us after if you need to talk about anything specific. Really fast, I do apologize. Usually I take about an hour and a half to go through those same slides, but time was of the essence, and hopefully I can clarify anything during the panel session. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you so much, Tal, for going through that, all of that information so quickly. I think if you're sat in the audience thinking, wow, that was a lot of information, I'm not quite sure what to do with all of that, don't worry, this is complex, and that's why we've brought in the experts to talk to you today. But two, you know, what we really want you to take away from this session is that these routes are available, and there's a lot of support to help you understand more about these routes and how to go about recruiting international students on these routes. So what we thought we'd do for the sort of latter stage of the session really today is try and bring all of that information to life. So a lot of information there, but actually for yourself as an employer that's based in the region, how do you go about looking into this further? And I think crucially, how do you understand more about the benefits of recruiting international students and graduates from the region's organisations? So the next part of our session today will be giving you the opportunity to hear from a couple of employers based regionally who have done just that. Before we get started properly, if I can just ask Mark, you're already on camera, and Lee, just to switch on your cameras, and if I can just ask each of you to just provide a really, really quick overview about yourself, your organisation, and a little bit of info about the international students, graduates that you've recruited recently. So I'll kick off with Mark, because your face is on the screen. If you can just provide just a short overview of yourself, your organisation, and your experiences recruiting, that would be great.
Of course, thank you, Helen. So yeah, so I run a company called Wubbleyou. So we're a software development company. We build web and phone apps fundamentally, but what we're really good at is bringing tech products to market for fast-growing businesses, which generates seven-figure revenue streams that they didn't have before. You know, so by the nature of what we do, we're recruiting people who will develop like high skill sets, you know, in the technology space. You know, we're a team of 10 based in northeast of England. You know, I think my experience recruiting international grads, you know, so we've employed 2 in the last 2 years. I think the experience that they've brought is more like a different mindset, you know, like worldly people, right? People who have lived in another country and then moved here. And I think there's a level of ambition in doing that that stands out. You know, I think, you know, you want, I guess, as an employer, people who are ambitious and hungry to learn. And I think what demonstrates that more than kind of moving your life across the world to live here, right, and study and find work. You know, so in the short version, Helen, it's that.
Thank you. And I think just for our audience, could you perhaps just clarify the route that you've taken to recruit international students and perhaps where those students originally came from as well, just out of interest?
Of course, yeah. So we've hired from Nigeria and India. One came through a student visa and the other one was a graduate visa, but both of them we hired through like a graduate internship program at Northumbria University. You know, so why I think that was why I think that really works for us is because, you know, it's kind of scary, right? On the face of it, looking at, okay, you know, if we want to do this, we need to sort of go through that sponsorship process and you know, be capable of handing out sort of skilled worker visas. And I think what that process allowed us to do by employing people who already had those sort of student and graduate visas in place, you know, that's quite a simple process for an employer. There's nothing much you really have to do apart from some of the checks that sort of fell put forward. And I think that made it, you know, a far easier sort of like first sort of stepping stone, allowing us to then sort of understand, okay, is this really the right thing to do? And then go, yes, it is, right. And then we went and did the full sort of sponsorship and skill visa route for both of them.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. I think that's a really interesting reflection. It's almost a sort of that opportunity to sort of test the waters a little bit and to sort of recruit someone on a very short-term basis initially, understand, what they're like, what their strengths are, how they can deliver for your organisation before committing to recruiting somebody on a longer-term basis as well. So I think probably important to flag that all of the universities that are here today offer those opportunities for employers to connect with them to sort of deliver short-term internships. Sometimes there's funding available as well, which I think is perhaps an important point to note, particularly for maybe smaller organisations that don't necessarily have the funds to be able to pay interns on those projects as well. So that's yes, Mark.
Yeah, just a final point on that. Like, after we did that, it made it a no-brainer from us. It took us from a position of like, oh wow, we're like this looks like a big scary commitment to like we would be just stupid not to do this. It changed our sort of state of mind around that.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. I think it probably perhaps humanizes our international students as well, because I think a lot of the stuff that we get in the media, perhaps that we read in the papers, is all about huge numbers of students coming in and the impacts that might have on home student populations, etc. And actually, when you actually work with international students and graduates, you see how great they are, and the challenges that many of them have gone through to actually get to the Northeast in the first place, and like you say, Mark, that life experience that many of them bring with them can really sort of put them ahead of their peers, their domestic peers sometimes as well. We'll come back to some of your experiences later, Mark, but thank you for the introduction. So Lee, over to you now. Do you want to just tell us a little bit about you, your organisation, and your experiences recruiting an international graduate?
Yeah, okay, thanks, Helen. So I'm Lee Jackson. I'm the Managing Director of Smart Carbon. First of all, a little bit about Smart Carbon. We're based in the Northeast. We are a carbon emissions reporting consultancy. We do three things. That we run a greenhouse gas accounting course through Northumbria University. So I think that probably meant that we were a little bit closer, if you like, to understanding about graduate access, maybe through that part of our business. We also have a technical platform that helps organisations measure and report their emissions. And then about a third of what we do is that we provide consultancy support to help organisations get to grips with this, what is very much a new practice. So putting that into some context, 3.5 years ago, I joined Annalisa, who's the founder of our business, and there were two of us. There were two of us, and we had 15 clients. And there are now 7 in the team, and we have over 500 clients. Going back to the point that we decided to take on an individual through the graduate program, with two of us in the business, and you get the kind of you get where I'm coming from in terms of we've gone from 15 clients to over 500. We really did have an immediate demand, and we were, as many small businesses are, under pressure, time pressure, in order to be able to manage any kind of any process, any administrative process. Equally, recruitment. I mean, I've been in business a long time, and recruitment is one of the most challenging aspects of what you do in business. And this is a very technical role that we were looking for. So you've got to try and get the right person. You're looking for the person with the right technical skills. These were very specific technical skills as well. And so, kind of cutting to the chase, we brought in my colleague, an India, who joined us, not directly, but he's an Indian national. He'd been working in Qatar for the best part of a decade, and then he did a master's at Northumbria, and an India joined us through the graduate program, and is now our lead consultant. And it's difficult to think where we would be without an Ninja support. One thing that I would add, I suppose in a little bit in keeping with what Mark was saying, is that the nature of our business is that it all rides on the back of climate impacts. It all rides on the back of the forecast impacts to the world from climate change. And that course that we run through Northumbria University includes global impacts. And so one of the real benefits of a Ninja, and more recently, we have a lady called Jacinta who's joined our team as well, again in Indian nationality. And one of the benefits that it brings is that when we talk to people about the impacts of climate, clearly the impacts on some parts of the world are going to be much more severe, much sooner than here in the UK. And it really helps having people in the team who have a real appreciation of that. Equally, as most of the organisations we work with are UK based, but many of them have subsidiaries around the world as well. Most of the clients that we work with, the majority of their emissions will flow through their supply chains. Those supply chains will be elsewhere in the world, and therefore having people in the team who have an appreciation of global, much more, an inbuilt appreciation of where the impact in industry, the progress in industry, and it's kind of inbuilt when you have come from elsewhere in the world, and that's really helpful to have that perspective, even though we are very much from a client perspective a UK-centric organisation.
Thank you. Thanks, Lee. I think really important reflections there, and the sort of the experience that is sort of built into our international graduates who've got that experience overseas. And I think you touched on something there, Lee. Some of our international student populations, particularly at postgraduate level, often they aren't just necessarily finishing their undergraduate course, progressing straight into postgrad. One of the things that you do find with postgraduates is that some of them can have 5 years, 10 years, 15 years experience in their home country. So perhaps as an employer, your vision of what an international graduate might be might actually be not the reality in some cases. And there are students studying at our universities that have been managers, leaders in their organizations, real experts that are looking to sort of apply that expertise here. So again, I think just reaching out to your institution, your universities that are based locally, to understand more about our student body and the programs and the courses that we offer, because that can help us sort of understand which of these programs might be most relevant to you to be able to make some connections. So Lee, thank you for that sort of overview. I guess just to kind of summarize and to clarify then, so Lee and Mark, both based in the Northeast, both quite small organizations. They've gone different ways. So Lee is recruited by the graduate route, that is the unsponsored route. Mark has recruited by the skilled worker route, so that is the sponsored route. So two very different routes, and we'll talk a little bit about the differences between those two routes and the pros and cons later in the session. I guess I'm going to come back to you, Mark, now. So Lee was already just starting to talk about the benefits that he's found in recruiting international students and graduates, from a sort of knowledge of global supply chains, for instance, being a really big draw for Smart Carbon. How about for yourself at Wubbleyou, both in terms of your organization and the context in which you're operating, as well as perhaps just culturally, and how you found that recruiting an international graduate has maybe enabled and provided that different perspective within your own organization?
Is this for me, Helen?
Yes, Mark.
Yeah, perfect. Right, I'll cut over Lee. Yeah, I mean, just to actually carry the points that yourself and Lee just talking about in terms of that, already existing skill sets. We found the same thing, right? So we employed someone, and we're getting CVs from people who had 5-10 years experience in a separate industry or a separate sort of skill set, and they'd just done a master's in the type of the type of skill set that we needed. So they're bringing sort of like graduate level knowledge for the role that we're employing them for, but like an insane amount of skill from a different field. And I think as an employer, that gives you pause to think, right? Like it's for example, in the technical industry, right, it's very hard to find people who are strong at, say, account management and sales and a technical, the technical part of the role. Whereas, I've seen CVs coming in to us from international students who have, 10 years in sales, and they've just done a technical MSc. Like if you're employing someone who you're maybe looking to grow through the organization, like that's a welcome surprise. And I think employers could be looking at this from that perspective. And equally for the graduates on this call who are international students, I think that could be an area that you really push to show, your, like, what makes you different from everyone else. That sort of combined skill set, that should catch employers' attention. In terms of culture, I think, the Northeast and the UK, I forget the stats now, right? But, we are like a country which is like, or an industry which is like 97% white, for example. And I think it's quite common and natural to see tech businesses which are just largely sort of like, like young white dudes. And I think that can create a bit of singular or group thinking, right? If you've got a group of people together who are all the sort of similar age, similar life experience. And that's certainly what we found, in the earlier stages of our business, because, if that's the pond that you're fishing from, that's what you're going to recruit. And I think, it really opened our eyes when we started employing people who, are different, not just in terms of, where they're from, but in terms of like fundamentally how they think, like the culture that they've been brought up in. And when they bring that, that mindset and culture into your business, you start to see, I don't know, I think you start to see cool things happening. You start to see thinking within the business which wouldn't have existed before. I see people making decisions or thinking about ways where I think, wow, I would have never have done it like that. And actually, that's way better than we would have done it. So it's not better or worse in that sense. It's just kind of different. And I think if you want to grow a business quickly, I think you do kind of need to be different. Yeah, so I hope that's a helpful answer.
Thank you. That was a great takeaway quote, Mark, from the session, I hope as well. So thank you. Yeah, I think it's that different perspective that an international student and graduate can bring in, and I think sometimes it can highlight our blind spots perhaps, and things that we just, for whatever reason we just haven't necessarily considered before. It sometimes can take somebody different to naturally come in and spot something perhaps instantly. I guess now coming on to perhaps the differences between the routes, and Tal, Kieran, I invite you both as well if you'd like to sort of join the discussion at this point. I suppose, Lee, you recruited via the graduate route, so I guess I'm curious to know a little bit about how did you find out about the graduate route? How did that sort of come into your existence, I suppose? So for context, the graduate route is fairly new. It launched in 2021. It gives international students 2 years or 3 years if they're a PhD student to sort of work in the UK. As a small organisation, how did you first find out about the graduate route, and what were your initial thoughts, if I can ask you to cast your mind back that far?
So I mean, my initial thoughts were relieved because we knew the person that we wanted to recruit, and we could see that this was going to provide a means by which we could make that a reality. We were blessed because we're a small business. We have an ops director who kind of joined the business kind of afterwards, but he's been an associate of the business for a while. Much of his work has been around HR and recruitment, and therefore he was aware of this route, and therefore he solved a potential problem for us when he was able to tell us about the graduate opportunity. We were aware of an India because, excuse me, my colleague Annalisa, not only is she the founder of Smart Carbon, but she also was running some courses through Northumbria University, and so she became aware of an India through the courses she was running, and equally through the NHS. where she does some work. So it became apparent to us that he was very, very well suited to the role that we were looking for. But and here is where I think the graduate scheme really solves a problem for especially a small employer. There are so many questions that remain unanswered at that point. And India had all the technical skills, but and he was well experienced in other parts of the world, in other industries, but you just don't know how someone is going to respond to working into a hugely fast-paced startup business, and if that's going to work out. And prior to that graduate route, I think it's fair to say I'm not so sure we could have got comfortable quickly enough, given how small we were with the sponsorship route at that point, Helen. And so this allowed us that time, and I think it's just as important, actually. Here am I saying it allowed us that time. It allowed an Ninja that time as well, because he might not have been. That's the danger when I say it might not work out. It might not work out for him as well. That it suits to work in such a small business, in such a fast-paced environment, commercial environment as well. So it allowed, more than anything, it allowed us that time, Helen, and it allowed us, if you like, to take that managed risk, as you always do when you employ someone.
Thanks, Lee. And I think that links a little bit with what Mark was saying earlier, that initial recruiting somebody through a graduate internship, through that sort of short-term, almost trial process as a way to test things out before committing to something longer term. And for employers that are here today, although the graduate route visa is only a very short visa and can't be extended, there are options for you to move that employee from a graduate route visa and offer them sponsorship at a later date. So that 2-year period is a really good chunk of time, really, to test the waters and like you say, Lee, see whether you're a good mutual fit for each other. Kieran, just wondering from a sort of an immigration perspective, any other sort of pros, I suppose, of the graduate route visa you'd like to sort of make our audience aware of today? So what are the benefits of recruiting somebody via this route?
Okay, so purely from a legal perspective, the benefits of recruiting someone via this route is that you can rely upon a new entrant salary. So that's when you would move on to the skilled worker visa. So when you first recruit somebody on a graduate visa, the salary doesn't even come into question. You can pay them whatever you want, the same as you would anybody else from within the UK. So it gives you the opportunity to see how well you're getting on with them. It's limited to their 2-year visa, and if at the end of that period you decide that this person is somebody you want to invest in long term, you want them to stay with you, then when you will switch them into a skilled worker visa, the salary that you will pay can be at a reduced rate. So you can pay them the new entrant salary for the next 2 years with the view that it will go up to the higher rate at the end of that 2-year period for the next 3. So that's probably one of the main and most clear advantages of the graduate route. But I think it's probably just more the flexibility. The actual route doesn't require any sponsorship from the employer, it doesn't require any commitment from the employer, and it's given to the individual purely based upon them having done a UK degree level or above qualification. So it allows you to get to know the individual before you would actually have to make the commitment of sponsoring them.
Thanks, Kieran. And I think as well, Tal mentioned this in the presentation as well. It's the international graduate that pays the application fees for the graduate route visa, so they're responsible for paying for the fees. So from an employer's perspective, you don't need to worry about sponsorship and paperwork for sponsorship and paying for that individual's visa. They take care of that. So it can be a pretty quick way, actually, to recruit somebody for a role, with the caveat that it only lasts 2 years or 3 years if they're a PhD graduate. I suppose maybe moving on to Mark now. So just thinking about the skilled worker visa. So you've gone down the other route in not looking and not considering the graduate route visa and going straight to the skilled worker visa. I suppose, what were your reasons for this? And I guess how did you find as an organisation the process for applying for sponsorship?
Yes, I mean, we did this by accident, I think is probably the way to put it. Like we started off, like we put a role out for business analyst, and we put that out through Northumbria University through the graduate internship scheme. And we had like 5 really high quality students and graduates apply for it. And 4 of them were international students. And by the time we got to the end of the interview process, it was very clear that we would have hired all 5 of them. And the top 2 were both international students, and that was our in, really. We ended up hiring someone on the student visa, part-time, and when that was done, they went full-time, and then we sponsored them through the visa, the skilled worker visa. And the next one, we ended up approaching them 3 months after we employed for the first role, and just saying, look, if you want this job, you can have it, because we were just sort of impressed with their CV and their interview process. I think in terms of the skilled worker visa itself, I think sort of what we learned is that, I think it's really important to get some outside help for that process. I think it is definitely worth doing if you find the right people, but the process itself is quite opaque, and actually on the face of it is quite scary. And I think if you've already got people in the business who you want to stay in the business, it's not really something, as an employer, I felt like I wanted to gamble with, if that makes sense. If I got it wrong, 2 people who I wanted to work here lose their jobs. So we sought outside help to run through that process for that reason. I think the management, once that's in place, I don't think is that onerous. You're not really doing anything, in my view, that you wouldn't be doing just running a solid HR process and paying your tax and all of the usual stuff that you're expected to do. So I don't think it puts, from a client's compliance perspective, really any extra significant onerous on the business. I think it's just the process itself is opaque, and I'd recommend getting some outside help with. I hope that answers the question.
It does, thank you. And you posted about this event on LinkedIn last week, and I thought one of the things that you said in your post was, frankly, we came across people who were worth it. So you as employers, you want to find the best candidate for the job, no matter where they're from, no matter their background, their nationality, and going through the motions of obtaining that sponsorship, yes, perhaps a bit complicated at the start, as we maybe seen in the slides. There's a lot of lots of complexities involved, and that can be challenging to get your head around. So using the support and speaking to others that have been in that situation, getting the support if you need it, but equally quite reassuring, I hope, for colleagues that are here today, to understand that once it is set up, the sort of monitoring processes and ensuring that you're being compliant, etc., all of that is not necessarily a huge job once you've kind of gone through that initial pain, perhaps, to get things set up.
And I think it comes back to something you said earlier, Helen, where it's like, we can look at this at a national scale and look at the numbers of it and the bad press and stuff, but actually, when you bring it down to people, when you view everyone as sort of like, just coming in via different routes into the business, if you've already brought someone in and they've worked here for 1 or 2 years through one of those other schemes, like, it does humanize it, and it does make it like this is just a sensible business decision, to do this, when you look at it at the end of the day. And I think that's how businesses should do it, because it takes all of the risk out of it.
Yeah, thinking about it from we want the right candidates, we want the best candidates for the position.
It's worth mentioning, sorry Helen, but it's worth mentioning that we then decided to take the sponsorship route with an India, and although our ops director Graham and an India basically kind of challenged themselves with the challenges of the application, and they found it as challenging as they expected, let's say, but we eventually got there. Is the feedback that I get from Graham, but I suppose, again, because we were that small, we were literally working on the application in partnership with our employee, who was reasonably confident, and that he was on top of the administrative process as well. which is, I guess, that is unusual and would only happen in a very, very small business such as our own.
Yeah. But equally, I think it shows that it is possible as a small business to do it. It requires a little bit of time, perhaps, and getting to grips with things. And I think the other thing that we haven't mentioned this afternoon is that everything that we've shared today is accurate as of today's date. And confusingly for us all, visa immigration rules, are subject to change. They can change. There were changes last year. So it pays to sort of make sure that you're consulting the accurate sources, so the government resources that we've shared in the chat this afternoon, but equally to reach out to the experts if you can to get that accurate and up-to-date information as well, and just to make sure that you've not missed anything. Could be another option that you might have that you perhaps hadn't necessarily considered. I suppose, today, for the employers that are here today, some of those employers are perhaps just curious and they're interested in hearing about your own experiences as regional employers. And some of them might equally be feeling a little bit daunted by all of the information, particularly relating to the skilled worker visa. So I guess perhaps maybe Lee, coming to you first, what advice would you give to anyone who's in the audience today who's perhaps interested in, recruiting an international student or interested in sort of exploring this further? What would be their starting point, would you say?
I think that the starting point, first of all, is not to be, I think Tal kind of mentioned this initially, which is that you start from the point of wanting to find the right employee and solve and get that right jigsaw piece, and actually that realistically, based on what you've heard today, you should put those things aside. Get the information from whichever university is operating the program, and then make the decision based on the candidates, and I think we were quite unique, because I think if we were to do it again, even though we may have learnt a little bit, I'd probably take Mark's route. There are people out there who can assist you with the administrative effort, and for what you have to invest in that professional support, if you've got the right person through the scheme, then it's worth doing. So if I compare this to the costs of recruitment agencies, it's well worth the investment, and it's very, very well targeted technically as well, in terms of putting you in front of the right candidates in front of you and vice versa. So I would not be put off. I would go into it with an entirely open mind, find the right candidate, and then go to whether it's Paragon or whoever it is that helps you. If you found the right person, get the support like Mark did, to then be able to work through administrative process.
Thanks, Lee. Anything to add, Mark, following on from Lee's reflections there?
Yeah, I mean, I can only agree with what Lee said. I mean, I was thinking I need to learn from Lee and figure out how we could have done this ourselves, but I guess the grass is always greener. I think I would mirror, like, when you look at the numbers, when you look at this purely rationally, it's with the right people, it's still cheaper than using recruitment agencies. I think when we look at this, I guess, less pragmatically, I think if you're open to doing this when other employers aren't, you're just genuinely fishing from a pond with talent in it that other people aren't fishing from, and I think, as Lee said, if you start with, if you look for the right person, and then, once you've got that right person in your business through one of the other schemes, and then go, well, actually, this makes a lot of sense now to really push forward with this, it turns it into a no-brainer, so I think just be open-minded about that and realize, like, other employers may be ignoring this and just leaving value on the table that you could grab a hold of.
Yeah, thank you. And I think that's kind of come across throughout this discussion really this afternoon. It's going back to you as an organization, as an employer, looking for the right person, and trying to remove any barriers that you might have put in place, to sort of assist with that and help facilitate that. Kieran, before we perhaps throw it out for any final questions from the audience, again, any top tips that you'd like to share with our employers that are here this afternoon?
In terms of joining the sponsorship management system and
yeah, just in terms of if employers are kind of, they want to know where to start with all of this. This is perhaps new to them. They haven't got that experience recruiting
Okay.
international students and graduates. What would be your top advice?
So there is information available on UKVI's website, but I have to agree that it's not as clear as it could be. So because we do this day in, day out, we will know exactly where to go. You do have to have someone very dedicated to trying to get all the information in the first instance to exactly what they need, documents, information, etc., maintenance, compliance. So generally what I think one of the first places to start with is, yes, have a look at UKVI's website. It will give you an overview. Then after that, what I would probably do is probably look for some advice that's a bit more specific. This is what we want to achieve. This is what we're aiming to do. What is that possible, and how much will it cost us? So most solicitors will hopefully be able to give you that information, at least that initial information, just by way of an initial consultation, which would either be free or for a very limited fee. But it will allow you to have a much better understanding as to exactly whether it will achieve what you want it to achieve and what the cost of it will be for you. So I think that's always a good first place to start. Find out, is it going to give you what you want, and what exactly will you need to comply with? Because most businesses that I come across when I'm speaking to them, yes, we will generally proceed, but there are a few who are, oh no, we just haven't got that, or we just haven't got this, and so then what we'll agree is that they will have an idea as to what they need to have in place before it becomes urgent that they need to join the SMS. Invariably, a lot of businesses that join the SMS do so for the very reasons that you're specifying, that they've come across an individual who they really like and they want to keep them. And that individual, for whatever reason, has made a lot of difference to their business, and they want to be able to keep them, and they don't want that disruption. That is over 50% of the reason that I will get approached by businesses saying, we've got this person, we really like them, we want to keep them. We will then go through the salary requirements with them, we will go through the timeline with them, we will go through which documents you need. Is this something that's achievable? We will then advise people on what the fee will be. And then if they're happy with all of that, we then proceed with the actual SMS application. So there is information available, but sometimes my concern is I don't think it's specific to your case. And actually speaking to somebody who hasn't,
I think we've just lost you a little bit there, Kieran, at the end, certainly on my screen. But I hope that the message is there. Obviously, this session is impartial, but it's up to you as an employer to sort of think about what guidance is out there from the UK government, and equally are there organisations that might be able to support you, because as we've highlighted today, there absolutely are, if that's something that you want to choose to sort of go down. So we haven't got, I don't think, any questions in the chat. I guess at this point, I'll just kind of open the floor if anybody's got a question, if they prefer to unmute themselves, if that's easier, then please do feel free to ask. We've only got a couple of minutes, so any quick questions for our employers or for Paragon. Welcome back, Kieran. Sorry, we just lost you there. Can't see anything. But I hope that this session has been useful today, and I guess before we finish, I just want to sort of finish up really with a couple of things, really, just to sort of highlight, I suppose. So hopefully you can see my screen. Just need to go back. So this has sort of come up during the course of today's conversation as well, but it may be that you're an employer and you're a small organisation and you don't have any vacancies at the moment, or anything that you're foreseeing over the next couple of months. But I think there are actually lots and lots of different ways that you could interact and engage and really start to build relationships, if you haven't got a relationship already, with the universities that are right here in our region. So as you saw from the stats at the start of the session, we have thousands and thousands of international students in our region, and lots of our colleagues who work one-on-one with these students find that lots of them are interested in staying in the Northeast when they graduate. They enjoy working here, they've had a positive student experience, and they are generally, you know, interested in working here after they finish, and it's our job really to help them be aware and understand what opportunities are out there, not just in the larger well-known organisations, but the smaller organisations as well. And one way to sort of get that word out there and to start building that brand awareness is to interact with students while they're still studying with us. So there's a lot of different support that the regional universities can provide. It may be that you want to offer something like a placement year for an undergraduate student, or an MBA placement, for instance, that opportunity for a student to have that very short-term work experience that features as part of their course. It might be an internship. So all of the different universities that are represented today run internship schemes with local employers. As I mentioned earlier, there's funding often available for these internships. You might want to come into campus, come to a recruitment event, deliver an employer talk, offer something in the curriculum. We work with lots of employers to run consultancy projects that are a sort of a core part of a student's academic program. You might want to offer mentoring and share your experiences with our students. So lots and lots of different ways that you can engage with us, and it's not just restricted to what's on the screen here as well. So if you'd be interested in finding out a little bit more, we've inserted relevant links here in the slides. So when you get the slides, you'll be able to take a look at all of the different universities and how they're all working with employers, and crucially how you can engage with those employers as well. But for anybody who's here on the call today, we have got reps from all 5 of the universities here. So feel free, university reps, if you want to put your email addresses in the chat, then feel free as well. Before we finish, we'd really like to get your feedback on how today's been. So we know there was a lot to squeeze into a 90-minute session, but we hope that you found that useful. We hope that that's provided a nice introduction to the graduate route, the immigration route. And I think, you know, really, really interesting to hear from Lee and from Mark about their own experiences, and the emphasis really that we've tried to sort of pinpoint throughout today's session on getting the right candidate for the job. And recruiting the best person that we can for our organisation. I've put the government guidance that we've also shared in the chat here as well, so you'll get those on the slides when we send them out too. That's it, unless there are any further questions, anything happening in the chat. I don't think there's a huge amount. So my colleague Christina shared the feedback form in the chat as well, so the link will take you directly to that feedback form. So it'll take you a minute, 2 minutes max, I promise, to fill it in, and we'd really like to understand how you found it, but equally how we as a team of colleagues from across the region's universities can support you with all of this further as we move into the next academic year. Final thing for me to say would be a massive thank you so much to Mark, thank you to Lee, thank you to Kieran, and thank you to Tal as well. It's been, this webinar couldn't work the way we intended without your support, and I think, you know, understanding more about the legal aspects and what employers need to know from a legal perspective is critical, but equally I think sometimes putting that into context and giving our audience a chance to hear from people who've done just that recently, working in partnership with Northeast based universities. So we really appreciate your time for sharing how things have gone for you, and we hope that that's inspired some people who are here today to start researching and thinking about this perhaps slightly differently. But like I said, we'll send the slides out and the recording, so you've got that afterwards as well. Thank you so much everyone for joining, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Helen.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.